Leonardo Rossellini stood in the dimly lit hospital break room, leaning against the wall as if gathering strength for the next step. The blue uniform of the technicians was still damp. He had just finished cleaning the emergency room. The damp fabric exuded a faint scent of cleaning solution mixed with hospital antiseptic. He was 32, and his figure still held the traces of his athletic youth: strong shoulders, upright posture, movements that conveyed a sense of restrained power. He had once played college football and dreamed of stadiums, the roar of the stands, and his own career as an engineer, but life, like a stubborn river, had taken a different course. His hands, calloused from constant labor, clutched the plastic handle of the mop bucket as his gaze drifted toward the room's door. Through the doorway, he saw Viola Carisi. She sat at a small table by the window, against the shimmering lights of the evening city. Her gray hair was pulled back into a neat bun, a stern gesture that gave her a surprising combination of efficiency and gentleness. Her face, illuminated by the cool light of the lamps, looked tired but not broken. At 28, she seemed older, not because of the wrinkles, which were almost non-existent, but because of the inner composure characteristic of people accustomed to bearing the pain of others in silence. She leafed through the patient's case files, moving her pen along the lines with the concentration of a surgeon accustomed to relying only on herself. Leonardo couldn't help but linger a little longer than was appropriate. He had been working here for 6 months, evening shifts, attending classes during the day. 2 years left until he graduated with an engineering degree. Tuition and rent bills left him no choice. Every Tuesday and Thursday, at precisely 7 o'clock in the evening, their paths crossed here, amid the smell of coffee, cheap plastic, and the rustle of pages. Each time, he found a reason to linger a moment longer, as if waiting for something he didn't dare name. But today was different. In the hallway, he overheard a conversation between several nurses. They were laughing, discussing an upcoming charity event, and someone jokingly asked Viola who she was going with. She just smiled and shrugged. Everyone was laughing, except Leonardo. He saw something else: how she brought 2 extra sandwiches to the refrigerator in the morning, without a label, without explanation, knowing that the cleaners rarely had time to eat. How she stayed after her shift to hold the hand of a patient whose visits hadn't been confirmed. How she spoke to everyone, from the surgeon to the new intern, with equal warmth and without a hint of condescension. He took a deep breath. The hospital air was heavy, but at that moment, it seemed to him that he was feeling not a sterile coldness entering his lungs, but something akin to determination. His broad chest expanded, as if about to take off. He stepped forward and entered the room. Viola raised her head. That same smile appeared on her face, warm, a little tired, as if specially saved for him. "Long shift, Leonardo?" she asked, putting down her pen. "As usual," he replied. His voice was even, but his heart was beating faster than after any workout. He wanted to say it calmly, but the words seemed to stumble inside him. "Actually, Viola, I wanted to ask you something." She tilted her head slightly, and the lamplight caught the silver strands of her hair, turning them into a soft glow, like moonlight on water. Time seemed to stand still, stretching the moment into eternity. "Next Friday," he began, feeling his voice waver slightly, "there's a charity gala at the hospital." He fell silent. The words, so simple, suddenly felt heavy. He knew what it looked like: a janitor inviting a nurse to a formal appointment. He knew what people would think, and maybe that's why he wanted to say it to the end, not giving fear a chance. "I was wondering, would you like to come with me?" he said finally. Silence hung between them, clear, ringing, like the breath before a confession. Someone passed in the hallway, a bucket clanked, but here, in the small room with the smell of coffee and hand sanitizer, the whole world seemed frozen, awaiting her answer. Viola's expression changed, first delight, almost childish surprise, then something deeper, quieter, touched, as if his words had touched a chord in her that hadn't been played for a long time. Her gaze took on that rare combination of embarrassment and warmth that makes a person especially alive. "Leonardo," she said quietly, as if afraid to frighten the moment, "are you sure? Tickets to the gala are $300 each." He nodded without hesitation, with that calm confidence that comes not from wealth but from determination. He'd saved the money for weeks, setting aside every little thing, limiting himself in everything for the sole opportunity of spending this evening with her. Viola bit her lip, smiled a little wider, and, as if softening the awkwardness, added, "But I must warn you that I reached the pinnacle of my dancing skills back at my graduation in 2010, her voice was so light that the tension instantly dissipated. Leonardo chuckled, lowering his gaze and quietly replied, "I peaked around the same time, and I'm afraid it was a rather dubious achievement. We'll be perfectly matched in our mediocrity," she remarked, now laughing openly. "Yes?" he clarified, raising his eyebrows slightly. "Absolutely," Viola said, and her laughter, pure and free, filled the sterile room with unexpected warmth, making the fluorescent light seem softer. The week that separated their conversation and the evening of the ball passed for Leonardo like a short but intense dream, full of anxious anticipation, awkward attempts to find a tie, and endless rehearsals in front of the mirror in his tiny studio apartment. He rented a tuxedo, a little tight in the shoulders but giving him a confident stance, and, turning on some old music, tried to recall the movements that had once passed for dance. All the while, his mind kept returning to that evening in the lounge, to her laughter, to the light that suddenly grew warmer simply by her presence. When Friday came, he came to pick her up, not quite sure what to expect. Viola's apartment was in an old building, without an elevator, with peeling plaster and the smell of coffee in the entryway. The simplicity of the place surprised him. A nurse, the daughter of a wealthy man, could have lived anywhere, yet she had chosen this very place. When she opened the door, he was speechless, not because of the dazzling outfit, but because of how natural and calm she looked in her dark blue dress, accentuating the cool glow of her eyes and the soft curve of her shoulders. "You've tidied up nicely, Mr. Rossellini," she said with a hint of irony. Taking his arm, he smiled, feeling his hand tremble. "You look beautiful, Viola, as always." The gala was held in a grand ballroom in the city center. Massive chandeliers sparkled with hundreds of lights, an orchestra played melodies from the last century, waiters glided among the guests with silver trays. As soon as they entered, Leonardo felt the gazes, not obvious, but perceptible, like a soft whisper passing through the room. People were looking not at him, but at Viola, at the confident way she walked beside him, unhesitatingly, unhurriedly, as if nothing mattered. She seemed completely oblivious to the glances and whispers, and there was something unshakable, almost proud, in her calm. They danced to old tunes, slightly out of step, occasionally tripping over each other's feet, but with such joy and ease, as if no one else were around. Viola's laughter grew more frequent. She allowed herself to be simply a woman, not a nurse, not the daughter of someone important. Leonardo held her carefully, as if she were something fragile, yet firmly enough that she could rely on his movements. When the music faded and their steps slowed, Viola looked up, as if deciding on something long put off. "Leonardo," she said, barely audible, "I need to tell you something about myself." He looked at her with a slight smile, but there was no curiosity in his gaze, only benevolent attention. "I know who you are," he answered simply. "You're the woman who stays after her shift to hold the hand of a man dying alone. The one who remembers everyone's names, even those no one else remembers. Who sees not positions, but people." "That's not what I meant," she said quietly, pulling back slightly to look him in the eye. "My father is Filippo Carisi." The name fell between them like something heavy and familiar. Leonardo recognized him immediately, the CEO, one of those whose photographs hung on the wall of honor in the hospital hallway, the man whose donations had built the new cardiology department. And now his daughter stood before him, a woman who never used her last name, never wore gold, never flaunted her status. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked finally, feeling his strange surprise gradually give way to respect. "Because I wanted to be known by what I do, not by my last name," she replied calmly. "I became a nurse against his will. My father dreamed of seeing me on the board of directors, surrounded by numbers and contracts, but I chose to be where I could make a real difference." She studied his face, as if trying to read the reaction in every movement of his eyebrows, every pause in his breath. "Does this change anything between us?" she asked quietly. Leonardo remained silent, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he was searching for words that would sound neither frivolous nor too serious, his thoughts revolved around a simple fact: he already knew who she was, long before she confessed. Then he smiled, not the polite, brief smile people exchanged to fill a silence, but a genuine one that touched his eyes, causing them to wrinkle at the corners, as if his face itself couldn't withstand the onslaught of an inner light. It was a smile that held everything: tenderness, understanding, and gratitude for the presence before him of someone who had opened up to him completely. "The only thing that's changed," he said after a short pause, "is that now I understand why you sometimes look a little sad when we talk about someone's financial difficulties, as if you feel guilty for having something others lack." His words didn't sound like a reproach, there was no pity in them, only a quiet acknowledgement of the truth, spoken with a warmth that made one reluctant to defend oneself. Viola's eyes sparkled, and she lowered her gaze, smiling slightly, as if apologizing for her feelings. "Most people either want to be around me for the connections, or they're wary, judging me for being born into a world where things come too easy," she whispered. "I'm tired of this, Leonardo, of people seeing my last name, not me. And I want you because of your terrible dancing and your habit of stealing my fries during breaks," he said, and her laugh, trembling with tears, cut through the air like a ringing melody, restoring lightness to the world. "And, Viola," he added after a short pause, "you should know, I don't plan to remain a janitor forever. I have 2 years left until I get my engineering degree, but even if things had turned out differently, I wouldn't be ashamed of my work. Honest work is not shameful, it is the foundation of everything that has meaning." "I know," she said, smiling through the last of her tears. "I saw your textbooks in your locker. Advanced thermodynamics isn't the easiest evening reading after work." He laughed, and she reached out and touched his palm, quietly, simply, but in such a way that the entire room seemed to vanish. They danced until the very end of the evening, oblivious to the glances, the whispers, the rustling of dresses, and the clink of glasses, because at that moment the entire world shrank to the circle of their movements and breaths, matching in rhythm. The chandeliers dimmed little by little, the orchestra played its final notes, and they continued to spin, as if afraid to stop, for then the magic woven from simplicity and mutual recognition might dissipate. 6 months passed, and in the spring, as the university auditorium filled with applause, Leonardo stood on stage, receiving his engineering degree with honors. Viola sat in the front row, beaming as if this success belonged to her as well. She applauded louder than anyone else, unconcerned about propriety, and in that moment he understood: nothing, not titles, not status, not the opinions of others, matters when there's someone who's genuinely proud of you. Even her father, Filippo Carisi, initially wary and reserved about their relationship, eventually recognized that he was a man of rare dignity. His respect came not from merit or position, but from honesty, that inner integrity that can't be bought or faked. And when they married the following spring, the ceremony was modest, almost homely, but filled with a warmth unseen at lavish receptions. In the hospital chapel, decorated with simple white flowers, among colleagues who had become like family, Filippo Carisi walked his daughter down the aisle, to the man he now called his son, the son he never had, but always longed for. As they exchanged rings, the air filled with the ringing of bells and the light filtering through the narrow windows, as if the hospital itself blessed their union, the place where a story unlike any other had begun. Years later, when Leonardo had become a successful engineer whose designs helped build modern medical centers, and Viola had opened several free clinics in poor areas of the city, their life, despite achievements and changes, remained remarkably simple in its most essential aspects. In the evenings, they would turn on the old record player, pull out a record familiar from those days, and dance in the kitchen, where the smell of fresh bread and coffee mingled with memories. They still laughed when they stumbled, and still held each other tightly, as if afraid of losing not the rhythm, but the feeling that had started it all. When the janitor had mustered the courage to ask the nurse to dance, unaware that he was inviting her not just for the evening, but for a lifetime. And now, years later, they both knew that true love isn't measured by position, wealth, or the trappings of success. It lives where one person sees in another not a role, not a name, but a soul that resonates with them. Love, they realized, requires not grandiose words, but simple courage, to take a step forward, to bridge an imaginary gap that exists only in our heads. Sometimes the most precious treasures come to us in the humblest form, a man in a work uniform, with a bucket and mop, or a woman holding medical records, and it's up to us to have the heart to see something truly great behind this outward simplicity, because love, like light, always finds its way to where it's needed, even if the journey begins in a hospital break room, between the smell of coffee and the rustle of pages.